Hi, in the Texas A&M model, they do raise the issue of, but don't get into the specifics necessarily, of cost to serve modeling. And there are two simple levels of modeling options. And so what level of calculation? Do you want to do it at a transactional level, or do you want to do it at a line item level, which then allows you to look at both SKU supplier profitability as well as customer transaction profitability? And based on what calculation sophistication you have, that will allow your envision journey to go further in a sense or shorter. Now, I personally invented, out of necessity back in 1976, a customer level cost to serve model, and I call it the keep it simple transactional thing. Basically, what I did is I said, let's just take the gross margin dollars that we get for a customer for a whole year. Let's take the total number of transactions that customer gave us, including credits also, for the year. And we're going to multiply that by the average cost of a transaction. And the way I figured that out is I just took all 29,000 transactions for the year and I divided it into that branch's profit center's total cost structure, and I came up with some gee whiz number of $110 or whatever it was. And the key thing, though, was that the computer would rank the customers from the highest estimated net profit customer to the lowest. So the only way you could be at the top of the report is to have a ton of margin dollars and not much activity cost. And the only way you could be at the bottom is to have, you could have good margin dollars, but you had even more phenomenal activity cost dollars. So you had to be huge activity cost dollars to be at the bottom of the report. Now, you could go back and sort of say, well, let's second guess this model and refine it. But when you start to refine my basic keep it simple model, you'll find that always the top 20 customers are still in the top 20. And the bottom 20 are always in the bottom 20. They shift around. Number 1 drops to 6 and number 7 goes up to number 2 or something like that, but they're all still super winners and super losers. And you start to realize that, golly, I don't have to have a perfect model. If my model is in the ballpark, it's sort of 75% approximately accurate, that's good enough to say this is really great or this is really bad, and we should not lose and do more of really great, and we should figure out how to deal with really bad and not have more of it, and or transform alchemy lead to gold the stuff that we already have. But to say, well, because it isn't perfect, it's got to be 100%, or we're going to stick with the financial status quo, which obviously is far less accurate than a customer profitability model. It's kind of an ostrich kind of approach. I don't want to see that we have big losers, so let's just put our head in the sand and have an agreement that we can just keep going on doing what we're doing. Now, what are the keep it simple fixes that we could do beyond what the Texas A&M model currently is asking or suggesting? And in the previous slide, I talked about, well, we can hive off wholesale customers and put them in a different service model division, and that raises a lot of questions of how do we do that. Case studies are coming. We could, in the Texas A&M model, doesn't suggest that once we look at customer profitability, we realize, because of boundaries and stratification, we actually have too many salespeople to try to cover the few viable customers that will support outside sales coverage. It used to be salespeople were a lot less expensive than they are today, and people needed them a lot more than they do today because there are other ways of getting information, and that's why door-to-door encyclopedia guys and above-board open real economy good humor trucks with good ice cream used to come by on a regular basis. That's why guys used to pump our gas, etc. Lots of intermediaries have disappeared because the cost of what they were doing just got too expensive for what we really wanted to pay for. So we need to downsize our small order reps. And at YouTube, in Nichonomics, playlist 4, clips 37, 44, 45, we talk about that. Also, Article 4.11 will go into how you downsize, upgrade your sales force. And what this means is if we get rid of some of our small customer smaller sales reps, and they actually do have a few A accounts that they're sitting on, they're actually under realizing the potential of them, we could take those A accounts, give them to our best reps, in fact, sort of swap, here's some A accounts for taking all your little weenie ones and giving them to the wholesale division, and you're still going to have a lot more margin dollar in your new territory with a lot fewer accounts than you had in your old territory. So there's a positive trade-off we can give to our ACE reps. And then also we might say, well, fine, but what would be a new compensation program going forward? In other words, if we're looking at this transactional cost structure, how do we get salespeople more aligned with and preventatively, proactively preventing lots of small orders? And you can short term, you could just say, well, we're going to continue to pay you the same way, but maybe we'll pay you a higher percent of a smaller number that's been reduced by a flat charge to every transaction, so that if you can figure out how to get one customer to consolidate two small orders into one bigger order, you'll save yourself a flat charge and you'll get a percent of that savings, because that's the way your commission plan works. So that would be a very powerful nudge modification. Now, I think long term it would be better to start to move salespeople towards some sort of upside bonus that's paid towards the operating profit that customers actually give you, and figuring out how to grow and develop that in a win-win share of customer kind of way. A lot of these questions were first addressed by me, actually, by having Harvard Business School write up a case study back in 1978 called Paper Distributors Inc. Case E, the Small Order Problem. And I actually taught that as a paper distribution channel executive at the National Paper Trade Association convention in 1979. And at the end of this session with 150 people, mostly, older than me, I was 29 at the time, I said, how many of you have accumulated a lot of small customers that aren't growing anywhere, who give you small orders, and your service model cost structure exceeds the margin dollars they give you, so you're just dying of lots and lots of little nicks all the time? And there's a huge groan, and every hand in the room went up. And I said, well, how many people are going to go home and do something about it? And not one hand went up. And I said, well, gee, why? And people said the sales force wouldn't stand for it. It would hurt our bottom line. I mean, the objections we saw in an earlier slide. So I could have two conclusions. I could say, in the spirit of Taoism, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and the student was not ready. But I probably also could say that, maybe if I had been a much better teacher, I could have done a better job. So here I am, all these years later, trying to do a much more thorough job with that. So these are questions that we can build on top of, we are invited to think about by the Texas A&M model. In the next slide, we'll go a little bit further as far as line item profit analytics modeling. Thank you.